Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Councillor White, John White, and I'm the chairman this evening. And on my left, I have my acting vice chairman, Councillor Linda McWilliams. The other councillors who are sitting around the chamber are sitting on the two side tables. These are the ones who will debate and ultimately vote on the application in front of us tonight. On my immediate left and right, I have the TDC officers, including Head of Planning and Head of Governance and Legal Services. This is a formal committee, and it's very important that the councillors can hear and debate all the presentations. So I request that you remain quiet and don't interrupt the speakers. Now, I am hoping that nobody sitting out in the audience is here for what would have been agenda item 5, that is Mulleys Farm, Bentley Road, Little Bromley, because I have decided to defer that application until next month's meeting so that I can get a consultation response from Essex County Council. And therefore, if there is anybody sitting in the gallery that came specially for that application, obviously you won't want to sit through the rest of the evening and you may leave. Now, the order of business tonight will be as usual. The first item will have the officer will give us a presentation on the application. And then, if they are here, we will have in the public speaking those for and against, then the parish or town councillor, then the ward councillor, and finally the applicant. And then I shall invite the officer who put the presentation to us if there's any further comment, and if there isn't, we then go into questions, debate, and finally voting on the application. I should add that this meeting is being recorded by the council and will be available on the council website in approximately 10 days' time. So if we turn to the agenda, the next item is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies submitted on behalf of Councillor Bray with Councillor Gigliami as a substitute.
Thank you very much. And then to the minutes of the last meeting, that was the 11th of June. Are there any errors or omissions that anybody has spotted? Or if not, can I sign them as a true and correct record, please? I have a nod. I do have those. In that case, I will sign those. Thank you very much. And then we go to declarations. Any disclosable pecuniary interest or any personal interest, and what is the nature of it? And I will go just to the councillors. There are none to declare. Right. Item 4 is questions to the chairman in line with the Council Procedure 37. I have received none, in which case that takes us very quickly on to agenda item 6. Now that will be page 39, and this is a planning application 18/01-1800 detail. This is at Oakwood Park, east of Thorpe Road, Clacton-on-Sea, and I believe Mr. Faulkner's taken this one for us.
Thank you, Chairman. The item before us tonight is an application. It's a reserved matters application for 250 dwellings. It follows an outline planning permission which was granted in 2015. That was for a wider site, which included an element of commercial development to the north of Oakwood Business Park, which has been approved and has been developed. The site before us extends to just over 10 hectares. It's unfarmed agricultural land and forms part, as I said, of a wider development site. It sits to the north of Clacton. It's outside of the development area in the adopted local plan, but is included within the emerging local plan. If we move on to, that's the site plan before us. As I said, to the south of that is Oakwood Business Park, and in part that has been developed. Land to the south of the site, which I want to go on to this plan, south of the site, as you would have seen from your site visit today, has been developed, or is in the process of being developed, for 47 bungalows and 2 houses. And to the north of the site, hasn't been implemented yet, but there is another approval for 81 dwellings. That's primarily single-storey retirement, and there's a small scheme for another 5 to the north as well. So the principal development has been established on this eastern side of Thorpe Road. The slightly lighter green on the plan before you is the emerging allocation for Oakwood Park. It's an allocation for up to 500 dwellings, and also some form of community uses, including a new primary school as part of that. Access to that will be through this particular site. Various photos, as you would have seen from your site visit today. The picture at the bottom of the screen is the roundabout that's already been built as part of this development. That was also to serve commercial, but will now actually serve the residential. The top plan just shows some of the existing boundary treatment on the looking west across the site. Various other views showing existing established landscaping. Obviously, it is an open, relatively flat site at the moment. That shows the existing commercial development on Fowler Road, which did form part of the original outline consent for this site, and that has actually been built out. I'm not sure if you went up there as part of your site visit earlier today, but as part of that development, there is a new cycle and pedestrian link which goes up to the site boundary with the current application, and that will form the main principal pedestrian and cycle access from the site. The plan before you there is the proposed layout for the scheme. It follows the general principles of the outline. It shows the main artery through the site from the roundabout. On this plan, it's actually to the south of the plan, but clearly that will be on the western side of the site. And it shows, obviously, links through to the proposed development on Oakwood Park as part of the emerging allocation. The development, as I said, is for 250 dwellings. It will be principally 2-storey, or predominantly so, with elements of 2.5-storey to articulate and provide an element of interest to the street scene, but primarily it will be 2-storey. There's various character areas within this particular layout, which I'll go on to in a moment. Well, this is just a slightly more detailed version of that, showing the eastern side of it. And as I said, it shows the links through to the development to the east at Oakwood Park. That's the southern part. Well, that's the western side of it. It's a bit confusing with the plans the wrong way around. But that obviously shows where you were today in terms of the roundabout access to the site. To the south side of the roundabout will be a balancing pond, some landscape also to the other side of the access into the site. In terms of the road front, well, the development on that western boundary, clearly it has been set back to retain some element of landscaping. There is a landscape belt on that western part of the site which will be retained, with a green area in front of that as well. Further into the site, you'll see that triangular piece of land, which will be a new open space within the scheme. And clearly, they've looked to design that with dwellings around it to actually create a sense of place within the scheme. This plan, as I just explained a little bit earlier, shows different character zones for the developments. The green area of the site is actually called the rural edge, so that's a slightly lower density form of development. A lot of it's just single frontage onto the rural edge of the scheme. In terms of the yellow area on that, I'm not sure it's very clear, it's that colour on the plan, but in the middle of the site, that will be the village green. By its nature, there's obviously the village green in the centre of that, and development will be served around that. And then finally, the bluish areas will be what's called the boulevard area, which is very much the main artery through the site with development fronting onto that. As part of that, and during negotiations on this application, green areas and trees have been provided along the road frontage to actually create that green boulevard feel to that development. And as I said earlier, that will actually serve into Oakwood Park in the future. This plan before you is just showing the story heights, a little bit disingenuous in the sense where it says 1 story. That is only garages on the scheme. It is principally, the blue is 2 story, and the yellow ones are the 2.5 stories. No full 3 story on this or flatter development as such. But obviously where you have got the yellow areas, it's to add an element of townscape and interest to the scheme rather than it being uniform 2 story throughout. This plan before you is just purely showing the materials palettes. There is a mixture proposed on this development, as we'll go on to the elevations in a moment, but there'll be brick, red brick, buff brick, elements of rendered wooded features to create a vernacular form of development. We'll go on to... This plan shows the affordable housing. You can hopefully just make out on what is actually the southern side of the site next to Oakwood Park is the affordable housing element of the scheme. That will be 16 2-bed units. That was negotiated with our housing colleagues. So in terms of the actual size of those units, that's something they've actually suggested is the need in this particular location. This plan is just purely showing a little bit more in terms of the landscape treatments, the garden areas, and how the outer edges of the scheme are actually developed on this site, obviously to create some form of landscape belts. As I said earlier, the main artery will have a tree-lined boulevard. Obviously we've got suds areas as well, and obviously the village green in the centre of the site as a feature of the developments. In terms of the elevations, as I said, these is a number of the street scenes. This particular one, the top one is showing really the dwellings that actually front towards the roundabout. Obviously you can see that's been scaled down to 2 story. The middle street scene is one that actually fronts onto the open space of the village green in the middle of the site. As you see, to add interest to the scheme, there is a mixture of heights there in terms of standard 2 story, but with an element of 2.5 story as well, with dormers in the roof. And just in terms of the latter one, I was just trying to work out where that one is on this plan. Not very clear to me myself where that one is. I think that's again near the village green, but just really showing again the form of development. As I said, a mixture of palettes in terms of how the elevations are treated to add interest as well, in terms of rendered finishes, red buff brick, and timber black cladding as well. The top elevation here is just showing an example of the boulevard, the main artery through the scheme. And likewise with the latter elevation there at the bottom. And just various elevational treatments for the scheme. As I said, red brick, timber clad to another elevation there. Various forms of development. I think the top one there is showing the affordable housing type. And as you can see, that is very much mirroring the rest of the scheme. It's 10-year blind. It's not actually suggesting it's affordable housing. It's obviously very much mirroring the private units on the scheme. Again, various other treatments to the elevations. Obviously showing examples of the 2.5 storey with bonnet dormers in the roof. Various other examples of the detached units on the scheme. Again, a semi and a detached unit at the bottom of the screen. Views of the garages, the double garages, which will be fully to the council standards in terms of allowing for not just car parking, but for storage and for cycle storage parking as well. So very much to those standards. And again, that's just really just showing well, this one is actually showing something slightly different. It's not quite clear on that, but during the negotiations, and obviously since the outline consent was granted, clearly the council is now working with Natural England in terms of the recreational pressures on the Essex habitat special protection areas. And as part of that, the applicant has agreed, in terms of on-site mitigation, there will be a circular walk around the edge of the site, which will link in obviously to the wider scheme once that's developed. But in addition to that, as shown in the recommendation, there will be a unilateral undertaking for this development, which is already in with the council and subject to scrutiny. So that has been agreed that Persimmon will pay those financial sums, which Natural England have signed off and have no objection. This plan just shows the phasing of the scheme. As you suspect, they will be building out from the road in and moving outwards from that towards the outer boundaries of the site. And finally, in terms of part of the outline consent, there is a requirement of the developer to fund a new bus service, which will actually serve Clacton town centre and the railway station. And that will actually kick in at the occupation of the 50th dwelling on the site. And as part of this, what has been agreed is a bus will enter the site and there'll be an alighting area as you get to the back of the site where a bus can turn and leave the site again. Obviously, when the wider Oakwood Park site is developed, clearly a bus will then go into that and will come out again. But for now, this is the arrangement that is being proposed. And that is essentially it. Obviously, the recommendation is for approval subject to the unilateral undertaking being completed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we go into public speaking, and I have to say I don't have a member of the public speaking either for or against the application, and as it's in an unparished area, we don't have a parish or town council representative, and there's nobody from the ward. So we go straight, unusually, to Mr. Martin Robeson, who's acting as agent for this site. Welcome, sir. You're getting experienced at that now, and you appreciate you get 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. This scheme's reserved matters fully comply with your policies and standards. There are no compromises. The full amount of open space is provided, including a fully equipped play area. All garden size requirements are met, and most will exceed standards. Privacy distances are satisfied. Requirements for resident and visitor car parking are fully met. The site's scale facilitates a series of distinct character areas, enabling a variety of house types and layouts, from mews to tree-lined boulevards, together with a spacious landscaped arrival area. An attractive design-led scheme is thus successfully accommodated on 10.6 hectares of the original outline permission's 12.2 hectare site. This has been a product of the house builder's expertise in ensuring high quality and deliverability and positive engagement with your officers. and there are no objections. The outline application was equally uncontroversial. When the outline was granted in 2015, the district had less than 3 years' supply of housing land, not the necessary 5. The delivery of this site has remained a critical component in the Council's defence of unwelcome applications. But this is not a site where things stood still. An earlier permission for employment development was used to construct the large new roundabout access from Thorpe Road, as well as facilitating the proposed pedestrian and cycle connection through to Stevenson Road West and the new business units there. These are now part of the scheme's essential infrastructure. The remaining land along the eastern boundary will shortly be the subject of a full application for a modest second phase. But this scheme clearly sets its context. The development will help facilitate the release of the large proposed local plan allocation to the east. Indeed, the approval of reserved matters tonight will trigger the exchange of a contract between my client, the applicant landowner, and the developer of that allocation. That will ensure the provision of the necessary infrastructure into it and thus unlock it. So I commend your planning officer's recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Right, councillors, you saw the site this morning and it's been explained that this is the detailed of something that was agreed some 2, 3, 4 years ago. So your comments, please. Yes, Councillor Guglielmi.
Well, I'm pleased to see it's got a bus route in it, because the one thing that concerned me is the fact that these are family houses. There's no school within immediate area for them, so they will need to have a bus route to get the children to school. If not, we're having cars going with 250 houses. You could have up to 500 cars going backwards and forwards. So would the school route be included on the bus route?
That's a question that, yes, I don't know whether Mr Faulkner can go straight in on that one.
I can't fully answer that one. All I can say is the bus route will obviously serve the town centre and the railway station. The site is, before that actually kicks in, there is obviously an existing bus route as well that goes through the the Oakwood Park industrial estate. I'm not sure which routes that takes into the town centre at present, but the site is within 300 metres at the present time once that link is in place.
And where is the nearest school?
I knew you were going to ask me that, so I have the answer in front of me. I did write it down. Yeah.
I would suggest, while Mr Faulkner is searching, the nearest school must be Bursville as a primary school, and Holland Park a little
Sorry,
bit
Chairman,
further.
yes it is. It's 1.25 miles from the site, and I did that not just by doing a bird's eye view. I looked at the routes you'd actually take, so it's about 1.25 miles, which on my reckoning would be about a half an hour walk from the site.
Yeah, there's quite a lot for youngsters, isn't it, for primary school people. Yeah, no, I commend the thing. I think it's very good, but I think they do need to think about children getting to school, because we're trying to cut down on emissions and everything, because that was another talk about electric cars, electric points for cars.
Well, just to add to that, clearly, whilst it doesn't form part of this application, the Oakwood Park allocation for the land to the east for 500 does include the provision of a new primary school. So although that won't obviously come on stream until that application is determined and not necessarily or potentially approved, but if it's approved, there will be a school as part of that development, which obviously be a lot nearer to this particular site.
Thank you.
Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure members who were here on this committee over the last 4 years would agree that we have seen a number of larger applications which we have levelled much criticism at. However, in this case, this is not one of those. And it ticks all the boxes for me. And as my colleague, Councillor Guglielmi, has just said about the bus route, I was quite pleased to see that as well, because that's going to be an important part, obviously, for families. And there was talk this morning as well about electric charging points for cars as well. So I was quite pleased to hear about that, even though I don't think it's actually going to be included at this stage. But that will be something that in the future people need to think about, electric cars. Other than that, though, it does tick all the boxes, and I'll certainly be happy to support approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Just on the electric car point, I was mightily impressed with that as well. And the agent, or the person who showed us around today, said that whilst it's not a legal requirement yet to install these, the company had decided to install the electric points on each of the 250 houses, so that and at a much reduced cost of £250 per unit it was going to cost them, I think, which is much cheaper, obviously, than retrofit after. So that's excellent. I think that's something that all further developments should be encouraged to do. And obviously the cycle lanes, I thought that was excellent as well. And on the whole, I think it's an excellent plan that they've got here. However, there is one thing that concerns me. It's a question that I'd like the officers to answer, please. Is that the agent made in his statement here said that it was fully compliant with planning policy, and yet in the documents that we have here on page 42, it says the following local and national planning policies are relevant to this planning application, which we can agree. And then it goes on to say at HG4, affordable housing in new developments seeks up to 40% of dwellings on large housing sites. Now, I would say this is quite a large housing site. The number of houses that are affordable are 16 out of 250. Now, whilst I may not be a mathematician, that doesn't equate to anywhere near 40%. It works out something along the lines of just over 6%. So it's way short. So is there an answer on that? And also a question which I'm always flummoxed by is, what is the meaning of affordable housing? I wonder if you can just quickly define affordable housing, please. Thank you.
Well, in answer to the quantum of affordable housing on this site, clearly that was approved as part of the outline consent. So, unfortunately, obviously we're now at the details stage. That element has obviously been negotiated with the council at the time, and has been agreed that that will be the quantum of development on this site, which will be affordable. Saying that, within the outline consent, the Section 106 agreement, there are a number of mechanisms built into that. Part of that is to ensure that the development does come forward in a timely manner, and it does allow for a review of financial viability if they don't actually develop a certain number of dwellings within the first 4 years of build-out. In fact, yes, it says if completion of 120 dwellings does not occur within 4 years of commencement of development, no further dwellings are to be completed until an update viability assessment is carried out and submitted for an analysis. And that could potentially trigger more payments to the council at that time, which could be up to 100%. As you know, with the emerging policy, it either allows for 30% provision on site, or alternative to that is 10% provision on site, and then the rest of it will be a contribution to the council for providing it elsewhere. So there's certain mechanisms built in there, and that could be an additional contribution up to 750,000 for affordable housing, if that actually happens. Clearly the developer may well build out of that rate, and we don't have that opportunity to go back and review that. But as it stands, the consent outline does say 16 dwellings, so that unfortunately can't be revisited with this detailed application.
Right, yes, Councillor Harris again.
So I'd just like the officers to confirm, is the up to 40%, that is still policy, and that is still something that we will strive for? I mean, is that, you know, I mean, I know that none of the decisions have been made, but is that a decision that we failed to enforce upon them in the past? And you know, it's just a concern, because that's a question that many residents are going to have, is why are the houses that are being built here not affordable? Because when I talk to local residents, you know, the question is, well, who are these houses for? Are they houses that we can afford, or are they houses for people sort of moving into the area? Now, I know that there's a combination of both, but, you know, I'm interested primarily with residents that live here now.
Head of Planning.
Thanks, Chairman. The 40% is, as you say, Councillor, in the policy in the adopted local plan. So that was adopted back in 2007. Since then, we've had more work done on the need for affordable housing, the viability of providing affordable housing in the district, and so that percentage will be less is less in the emerging plan. So the newly adopted policy will seek a lower amount. But it won't be as low as the 6-ish% that you've identified as being achieved on here, and that's as a result of the specific viability on this site. So the developers made a case at the outline stage that it couldn't afford to deliver the full quantum. So that would have been independently assessed and an agreement made, as Mr Faulkner described. But built into that, as is generally the case if the council accepts a percentage that's lower than the policy, then there's a review mechanism built into the legal agreement, so that if over time the viability of the site increases, there's an opportunity to renegotiate that. But I think you're absolutely right, it's a really big issue for the council, and when we are out and about doing consultation exercises for emerging policies, etc., it's probably the thing that members of the public talk about the most, is about the need for more affordable homes for particularly young people to stay within the district.
Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points, if I may. First and foremost, I'm very happy with the transport question that was asked by most of us today on the site visit, and the answer that we received from the gentleman there. The one thing that has popped into my mind is under consultations, Anglia Water, although that the Holland Recycling has the capacity to take all this on. It reads on, however, they have reviewed the applicant submitted for foul drainage strategy. The document and considered that the impact of public foul sewage network has not been adequately addressed at this stage. Anglia Water has found that this proposal may result in an increased risk of flooding in downstream network, but they go on to say that there is an ongoing consultation, and presumably that will continue and that will be monitored during this. And the second one, hiding behind here, the SUDs. I'm assuming if we could go to the map before us, if we may, please, and look at master plan and the word plan, and above it there's a triangle, which is the Thorpe roundabout. Up and to the right-hand side of that, the icon will place it, if we may. There's a pool there, which we were told how lovely that was. Isn't that the attenuation basin, which has been recommended for this? That's the other one. But apart from that, I'm very impressed by this, and I like the company. They seem to have gone out of their way to match what we need as a growing community. And if Councillor Fowler have you proposed this? If you have, then you have? Yep, then I'm happy to second that, Chair. Approve.
Okay, other points? Yes, Councillor Macy.
Can we have an answer to the questions, though, please?
On the drainage you're talking about now.
Yes, Chairman. In terms of that, there are planning conditions on the outline planning approval that still need to be addressed. So, notwithstanding the details before you tonight, there are planning conditions that were imposed on the outline planning permission that will still need to be addressed and agreed by the council in consultation with the relevant parties. In terms of your other question, yes, there is sustainable drainage on this scheme. As you say, to the south of the roundabout, that oval shape is a drainage basin. And elsewhere, obviously, there are other mechanisms in terms of drainage into the ground naturally, but obviously that is decided on as being the lowest part of the site, and that's why you have a sustainable drainage basin in that position.
That, if on my understanding of what we were told this morning, that will largely remain dry during the summer period, but it does allow, if in times of flooding situations or high water situations, to act as a pool on that side. Right, we have now Councillor Bracey.
Right, I've got you down. That's it. Sorry, going back to Councillor Harris's question, could you describe what you mean by affordable housing?
Why is it affordable? I think that's
Well, on this one, the mechanisms, as I said, it's 16 dwellings on this, and the mechanisms in the Section 106 agreement are either that's actually managed by a trust, which we're not aware that's come forward at this stage, and the alternative is that the council will take on the management of those total 16 units, and I suspect it will then be the decision of the council what form of affordable housing that will actually take. You're right, government policy now has widened the net in terms of what is described as an affordable unit, be it a social rented unit, an intermediate unit, and it also covers things almost like discounted market units as well now. But obviously the Section 106 was drawn up in advance of that time, so I suspect it doesn't really cover those latter elements. But as I said, it's likely that the council will take on the management and can determine the affordable provision in this case.
So they're likely to be rented?
I suspect that probably will be the case.
Boris Alexander. He wants to say.
Councillor Alexander, were you coming?
Yes, I'd like to come back. Yeah, I've been talking to my wife, I'm afraid. Okay, this is not what I understood today. What we understood today, the question was, why are the 16 houses being placed like that instead of diverse throughout the area, in which I believe is a policy that we uphold? The answer is logic, and I like the answer that we received. The fact is that they were there, and that for a housing association to take them over, then that would be the ideal situation. I didn't realise that that you were looking down the avenue that the council might be taking these back out or taking them over as units. In fact, I was under the understanding that wasn't going to happen. Could you clarify? Is these going to fall to us as TDC, or is it going out to...
I may default to my colleague on this, but my understanding in terms of negotiations from the housing department, that it would either be, or they would actually default to the council taking them on as, or the alternative, as you say, it could then go to we can actually defer that to a housing association to take on that management. Correct.
Head of Planning?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Yeah, so what I said earlier is true in general terms, but I've just been reminded in this particular case, rather than the houses just being made available for affordable homes, perhaps through a housing association, and in that mechanism, they would be made available at a discounted rate by the developer to the housing association. Because there was a period about the time that this outline permission was granted that we couldn't find registered providers who had the funds and were willing to enter the market in this area to do that, an alternative mechanism was used for a little while, where a smaller percentage of homes were gifted directly to the council on a handful of planning permissions. So it was a way to secure the provision of affordable housing, but not in the traditional fashion, if you like, at a time when there was that difficulty. So the monetary value of those gifted units, that smaller number of directly gifted units, is equivalent to providing the normal percentage at the discounted rate to social housing. So this particular arrangement is an example of a mechanism that was put in place a few years ago to sort of deal with a particular issue at that time. It doesn't reflect the council's adopted policy in the local plan, and applications that have come forward more recently for outline permission or full planning permission have been providing affordable housing in line with the policy of doing it at a discounted value at the higher percentage.
So, if I understand exactly what you're saying, and I'm hoping I'm taking it on board, are you saying that the council will take these on, or are you saying that these could be going out to... that's the question.
The planning permission requires, or the legal agreement attached to the planning permission requires that the houses will be gifted to the council. That's correct, isn't it?
If I can just respond on that. If I can just respond to that. If I refer you to paragraphs...
Lisa wants to say something.
Okay.
I just refer members to the report, paragraph 6.44, which is on page 59, starts at the very bottom of page 59 and goes over the page. The report says that the existing Section 106 agreement refers to the properties being transferred to a trust upon completion. The council has not had any contact with regards to the incorporation of a trust, and currently there isn't any evidence that it does exist. However, unless the council receives the evidence required in the Section 106 concerning the trust incorporation, and having consulted with the portfolio holder for housing, the council stipulates that they would prefer that the houses were transferred to the council as opposed to the trust. So at the moment, the current Section 106 agreement states that the properties will be transferred to a trust, and if the trust isn't set up, then the council would enter into negotiations with them regarding the properties being transferred to the council. But the first position is the trust.
Go on, I'll give you, yes.
So we are, I'm happy to approve, to second this, even now. So we are approving it, just to make sure I'm clear in my mind, with what you have just said. And I'm happy to take that on board as well. So at this moment in time, that we do not know where these 16 houses will go. So we're approving it with that in our mind.
The affordable housing was already picked up in the outline permission. So what I read out, which is in the planning officer's report, refers to what the position is on the affordable housing, which was agreed at outline stage. So there's no additional requirements of affordable housing. It's part of this application. So that's historical. That's what you've got currently.
Right, Councillor Harris.
Just as an observation, really, or what was said to me earlier today. If you can go back to the slide where it shows the future development as well, which is near the top there. That one right at the top. That's it. The thing that concerns me, and I know we're not necessarily here to discuss that this evening, but what concerns me is that the gentleman today said that overall there could be as many as 1,000 new homes built on that site. Now that will be, in terms of population, you're looking at possibly sort of 3,000 people that will live in that area. And there's one key thing, and I know that's where the local plan comes in trying to address many of these issues. But here, it may well have some serious implications for infrastructure. I know gentleman there said, the officer there said that there's plans for a school, but all I would say is that what concerns me, and when that ever comes before us again, that we need to be seriously looking at the infrastructure, the schools, the health, the GPs, the transport, the roads. It all affects. There's a lot of people going to move to that area for housing that we need. I recognise that, but we really got to look at the infrastructure before we go into that. So it was an observation more than a question, really. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Cawthron.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask the officers, I thought we had a policy to distribute affordable housing across larger sites. Is that in the emerging local plan, or is it a current policy? Thank you.
Chairman, yes, with regard to that, the emerging plan does talk about clusters of no more than 10 dwellings. Clearly, this is in excess of that, but only marginally so. And clearly, it's not all in one road frontage. It's actually broken down into 2 different road frontages in this particular case. So 10 were actually front onto the main distributor road, and the other 6 will obviously be further up on the secondary road. So yes, whilst they are in the same part of the site, they are distributed to a certain extent. And in terms of, obviously, from discussions with housing, again, clearly preference in terms of management of this would support this particular form of development in this particular case.
Nothing further. Now, my understanding is that Councillor Fowler is proposing acceptance, and Councillor Alexander nods to say that he is seconding it. If you are minded to vote for it, just to remind you that the conditions are shown in full on page 61. So I'm going to ask now if those in favour with those conditions would care to show, please. Those in favour of accepting it. And that is unanimous. So that is approved. Thank you very much. In which case, now we move to the second item on the agenda tonight. It's a planning application 18/02012. This is land adjacent to number 8, the Crescent, Frinton. And I think Mr. Norse is going to have this one for us.
Chairman, thank you. Yes, this is an application for the erection of one dwelling, land adjacent to Crescent at Frinton-on-Sea. And again, members will visit the site this morning. So this is the application site marked in red. You'll see the existing dwelling immediately to the west of the application site. And I think it's useful just to take into account the nature of the surrounding developments and the perhaps proximity of existing dwellings to each other. They are quite closely linked, both in terms of the properties to the rear of the site and indeed further along the Crescent itself. You'll also will have picked up the stepped nature of this site, so the actual proposed dwelling will be slightly stepped back from the existing dwelling, which mirrors to a certain extent the existing street scene. So that's the proposed layout. As I've mentioned, it is set back from the it's stepped back from the existing dwelling. There are 2 car parking places proposed at the front of the site. I think members picked up there's a small group of trees to the side which is close to the site boundary on the eastern side, they will be removed as part of this scheme to facilitate the new dwelling. But one of the conditions you'll note in the report is for a replacement tree within the front garden area. So that will be a requirement if permission is granted. You'll also be aware that there's an existing sunroom on the east side of the existing dwelling, which will be removed, again, to facilitate the new dwelling. So that gives the overview of the site itself. That's just a view of the existing hedge to the site frontage, I think much of which will be retained and or replaced once the new dwelling is put in place. So that's the existing site. As I mentioned, the existing sunroom to the west, to the east of the existing dwelling will be removed. There's the small group of trees close to the site boundary. That's a view to the east. That's the existing property. As you'll have noted, it has, or the nature of it is a rather large, if you like, mansard-style roof. I think quite typical of the dwellings within that locality. You'll note it's an existing render building, red tiles set on a brick plinth. So that's the proposed layout. It's a family-sized dwelling. So ground floor, sitting room, family room, dining room, utility and garage, 4 bedrooms at first floor, then a single bedroom within the roof space. So that's the proposed design. As I mentioned, the design does pick up the existing other designs within the area. So it's got a render finish with a mix of brick more to the rear of the property. There'll be a red tiled roof, although actual details of materials will be secured by planning condition. So in terms of the streetscape, you've got the existing dwelling roof heights as shown. It does keep just within the existing height of the 2 adjoining dwellings, albeit it is a different style to the adjoining properties. Clearly, the nature of the site, to a certain extent, does dictate it should be a 2 or 2.5 story dwelling, rather than sort of more of the style to either side of it. So, Chairman, that's the proposed scheme. I think the key things for members to consider are the site isn't a conservation area. It's where the actual design fits in with the locality, whether it fits into the actual site itself, whether it would appear as being cramped or overdeveloped or not. Certainly from the officer perspective, we consider the scheme to be acceptable, and the recommendation is to approve the scheme. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now, public speaking, I can go straight to the ward members, which is Councillor Nick Turner.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. Good evening to fellow members. You have before you an application for a dwelling to be built on the front lawn of number 8 the Crescent, which was built in 1905, when Frinton, as we know it, was around 6 years old, and is a fine example of an Edwardian seaside house. It lies within the Frinton Conservation Area. Number 10 next door is in the Avenues of Special Character, which demands minimum frontages of 15 metres or more. Surely a drafting error, as this house was not included. The frontage of the proposed dwelling will be 14.5 metres. Almost there, but not quite. To achieve this, the designated heritage asset, which is the conservation area, will have part of one of its original houses reduced to a frontage of 12.6 metres. Number 8 was built to reflect the plot it sits upon, facing the grounds in a southerly direction to maximise the view, daylight and warmth, all of which will be lost if you are mindful to grant permission. To reduce the front part of the house by removing the sunroom and then leaving it around a metre away from the fence of the proposed dwelling, which is a further metre away, is surely an act not worthy of our conservation area. It neither conserves, protects or enhances our designated heritage asset. The authority has taken into account 3 main documents: our existing plan, our emerging local plan, and the latest edition of the National Planning Policy Framework. The local plans have limited effect on your decision making, but must be included. The main document is the MPPF. That states that a conservation area is a designated heritage asset, an area of landscape, a site, etc., that has a degree of significance meriting consideration in planning decisions because of its heritage interest. Chapter 16, page 54, MPPF 2019. Paragraph 192 states in determining applications, little b, should take into account the positive contribution that conservation of heritage assets can make to sustainable communities. Frinton is a fine example of this. Little c, the desirability of a new development making a positive contribution to local character and distinctiveness. I leave you to judge that. Building a new ordinary house, 2.5 stories with roof lights in between a fine Edwardian seaside house and an equally large modern-day well-proportioned house is not in keeping with our policies where the 2007 plan states, quote, mature features must be retained to preserve the Arcadian setting of individually designed houses, distinctive architectural styles. That is for the avenues policy, which number 8 is on the borders of. Again, the MPPF states in paragraph 193 that great weight should be given to the asset's conservation. This is irrespective of whether any potential harm amounts to substantial harm, total loss, or less substantial harm to its significance. Paragraph 194 states, any harm to or loss of the significance of a designated heritage asset from its alteration or destruction or from development within its setting should require clear and convincing justification. Paragraph 201, loss of a building or other element which makes a positive contribution to the significance of the conservation area. Loss of its setting is another element, and that under paragraph 196 is considered as less than substantial harm, but harm it still is, and must be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. The asset in question is Frinton's conservation area. Now, one swallow doesn't make a summer, but it does show that it's on its way. One lovely, if neglected, Edwardian house does not make a conservation area, but is part of the reason for Frinton's conservation area. A designated heritage asset, and as paragraph 184 of the MPPF states, these assets are irreplaceable. I see no justification for garden grabbing, building a new dwelling on the lawn of this fine Edwardian house and reducing its view to seeing a flank wall with 3 obscured loo windows and 1 ground floor family room. The results in diminution of our conservation area and its definition as an irreplaceable designated heritage asset. I ask you to refuse this application by applying our old policies of EN17 and the effects it has upon FW5, the emerging plan PPL 8 and the effects on PPL 11, plus the MPP paragraphs 184, 192, 193, 194, 196 and 201. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
There's another speaker as the chairman.
Sorry.
There's another speaker.
Yeah.
I'll leave the microphone on.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Legree as agent for this site.
Thank you, Chairman, members. I won't rehearse all the planning issues and policies as Councillor Turner has just done, but obviously would comment that on the basis of what I've just heard, no development would ever take place in any conservation area whatsoever. So I have to say you need to take some of those comments for what they are. In this particular case, it is in the conservation area. It's not in the avenues area of protection, so you can't apply any of those policies. You do need to look at this in terms of whether or not the development will preserve or enhance the conservation area, character of the conservation area. That's the wording in the legislation. As you heard from the officer, the development does bear considerable resemblance to the close relationship and stepped arrangement of other properties in the area. As you could see on the location plan and as members saw on the site visit, the properties in this immediate area are very close to site boundaries. Notwithstanding that, this development meets all of your standards in terms of garden sizes, side boundary, side isolation policy, car parking. There were no issues from the tree officer, which is quite amazing, I have to say, for Frinton. All of those comments, all of those issues have been dealt with within this application. The scheme has been amended to reflect the views of the officers. There's been some considerable dialogue with the officers. I have to commend the planning officer in this particular case, who went out of her way to have that engagement with us. We've come forward with a scheme that we believe suits the character of the area, reflects the character of the area, and is in accordance with the character of the area. And I have to say, to sum all that up, an application in Frinton that generates 7 letters of support and no letters of objection is quite unique. And those letters of support are from the immediate neighbours. They're not from miles away. The local residents, the immediate neighbours, are very supportive of this scheme. And that is what I feel that you must consider and take on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I ask a question, and I'm glad Mr. Legree mentioned the 7 letters of support. Frinton and Walton Parish Council, or Town Council, considered it too great a size and mass. But looking at this drawing, compared with the property next door to it, it's minuscule compared with the big one next door. Perhaps I've got it wrong. Other questions, please? Must be somebody who would care to comment. Councillor Guglielmi?
We're only doing outline planning permission tonight, aren't we? No. It's full planning permission.
No, it's a full.
Oh, because I don't think the actual building itself is the right for that area. The actual building, and no problem with perhaps it being built in the garden, someone's garden, but the actual building itself, what we've seen, I don't think works with the properties either side of it, and the lovely garden opposite. But no, I don't. To me, well, that doesn't work with the property that it's right next door to either side. But that's my opinion.
All right. Yes, Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you, Chairman. I take your point about the mass of the property not being any bigger or may even be smaller than surrounding properties. But I think you have to judge the mass in respect of the site that it's in. And I would say, I'd agree with Councillor Guglielmi that the actual design of the house, that front elevation is something I'd expect to see on a development of 250, 500 houses. You know, an executive home. It's not something that fits in with this street scene. I think it's too large for the intended plot. Of course it meets the regulations. It wouldn't be here if it didn't meet the regulations. But we've got like a metre between the existing house and the new fence and the new fence and the new house. Can't be much more than a metre. I think it's out of character. It's detrimental to the conservation area. And I would recommend we turn it down when we've had a discussion. Thank you.
All right. Other speakers? Councillor Alexander, and then I'll take Councillor Harris.
I think I heard right. When we visited the site this morning, we saw that on the side of the existing property, there was a sun lounge extension to it, which looked very much in keeping with the. There we are, I can see it in front of us now. That has got to be removed. That's what's concerning me, the way that's got to be removed to get the other bit in. So that indicates to me straight away that there really it's just about enough land and no more. I looked, everyone could see it, big open glass thing, and they had the citrus growing inside of it, and it looked very nice and lovely. And it concerns me that you're removing something like that, which is a part of that house from the early 1900s, to make something to be constructed in 2019 in a conservation area, and at the same token removing a very healthy tree and a mature tree to do so, and that is bothering me immensely. We're talking about inside of a conservation area here.
Other speakers? Yes, Councillor Harris.
Councillor Nick Turner, he mentioned a number of items, including the MPPF and lots of... he mentioned so many I couldn't actually write them down all in time. But it's obviously I haven't got that information in front of me to really fully consider what he was saying there, which is of concern. But maybe the officers can advise whether or not that what Councillor Turner is actually saying has some validity in that. Well, I'm sure it has, but I'd like to hear the opinion of the officer, please. Thank you.
I think all of the policies that Councillor Turner referred to are relevant. They are pertinent to this particular case, and there are policies within the existing local plan, the draft local plan, and certainly the MPPF, which seek to preserve the character of conservation, the conservation area, and that development that appears within it must respect existing character. So the policies are relevant. I certainly do agree with that. So, or rather, they need to be taken into consideration. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Other speakers? No.
I'm just wondering if it's deferral on this one to find out.
Yeah, Councillor Guglielmi?
I think I would have to recommend refusal because the way it's standing at the moment, it doesn't actually fit in with the actual area. I've got no problem perhaps with a dwelling being built there, but the dwelling they're suggesting doesn't actually fit in the area where it is. So I think I would have to recommend refusal.
Right, Councillor Cawthron?
I'm happy to second that.
Right. Now, of course, the officers have recommended acceptance on it, so I shall want to know the technical reasons why you wish to object to it, which clauses you want to quote.
Well, because it's in a conservation area, it's the actual design of the actual building doesn't fit in with the designs either side of it. I don't know what that is on a planning policy. That actually the officer could advise us on that.
Yeah, Chairman, I mean, the key one is policy EN 17 of the adopted local plan, which notes that development within a conservation area must preserve or enhance the character or appearance of the conservation area. So, based on what Councillor Guglielmi suggested, it could be phrased that due to the inappropriate design of the dwelling, it's considered out of character with the locality and harmful to the appearance and character of the conservation area, and therefore contrary to policy EN 17 of the adopted local plan. Does that sound about right?
Any further comments?
Is Peter happy with that?
Councillor Harris, you want to add anything? No, sorry, it was
no, it's Councillor Cawthron.
Right.
Only that I feel that I take on board what you're saying about the design, but I feel that I really need more information in terms of the pointers that Councillor Turner said. So, if it came back in front of before us again, I'd like all that information to consider that fully. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, Councillor Cawthron.
Thank you. Paragraph 6.4 talks about HG3 policy in the adopted plan and SPL2 in the emerging plan. I think this is a material harm to the character of a local area, so I would like those two to be mentioned. I wasn't sure the one Graham mentioned, something 17. I wasn't sure what that was.
17, yeah.
Okay. Well, that as well.
Right. No further comments, in which case the proposer and the seconder agree. We'll take a vote on it, and that will be with these two principal points of objections, EN 17 and HG3. Good.
Does it include the design?
Generally, the design comes under SPL3.
Sustainable design.
I suppose it is sustainable, so that it's the general design, I gather, that we're all talking about in between two older style properties.
Old style, quite spectacular looking.
Yeah.
I don't think the other one to the right of the property is that particularly old. I don't know. This one, obviously, the original one is 1905, but I don't think that one is particularly old. But it actually blends in with the lower roof line and everything. It blends in the scenery. The design that we're in front of us doesn't actually blend in.
So with the design. Right, with those comments, just before I take a vote, just see if the officer's got anything to add, or otherwise I'll take a vote on it.
No, Jim, I think that's fine with me. Yep.
It is. Right, so you know what you're voting for. You're voting to refuse this application on those points. So those in favour of refusing, please show. And if I put my 2pence in, it would make it unanimous, wouldn't it? So that application is refused on those points. Right. I just wish all planning meetings would finish as easy as this, but that does complete the agenda this evening. Thank you all very much.